A very good afternoon to everyone. I would request the ones standing at the back to please take your seat. Yeah? Okay, now you can hear me. Great. So I would really request the ones standing at the back to please take your seat. We are ready to start. The ninth session of Valley of Words in Kolkata is Condemned, where Osman Haneef, who's in London, uh, and he will be discussing his novel Blasphemy with Miss Anjum Katyal. And even though everyone here knows both of them, I'll still take a little bit of time to introduce our panelists. Osman Haneef, child of a diplomat, grew up in different cities in Europe, Asia, Australia, and the Middle East. He received an MBA and MA in International Relations from Yale. He won the Frank Allen Bullock Prize for Creative Writing at the University of Oxford and was selected as the Acumen Fellow in 2016 and a Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum in 2017. In conversation with him is Ms. Anjum Katyal, who's writer, editor, LitFest director, a lot of other things. She's asked me very nicely, please do not bore people with the whole lot of things that I've done, so I'll try and keep it as short as possible. She is currently also curator of the new festival at Shantiniketan. She's the co-director of WOW Kolkata, the director, writing department of the Creative Arts Academy, and in all forms, superwoman in Calcutta. So off to you, Ms. Katyal.
Thank you. Now you know why I invited Atre to do the introduction. Hi, Usman.
Hello.
Clearly, yeah. Do you have to ask him to mute when he's not speaking? No, it's okay. Great. Hi, how's the weather in London? We have to start by talking about the weather, right? Since you're in London.
That's true.
Right
It's
now.
ever changing, but miserable. But I'm indoors, warm and snug, and excited to be here with all of you. I wish I could be there in person, actually.
Would have been great to have you. I think the sight of me sitting alone here on a stage, even though it's not a very large stage, is sort of a little unsettling for most people. So I'm hoping that your larger than life presence on screen will make up for it. I'm really happy to be chatting with you about your book, Blasphemy. And thank you for, I mean, I'm delighted that it's a part of the shortlist of the WOW Book Awards and therefore was able to be featured in the program in Kolkata. And I was wanting to start by asking you, as we heard when your bio was being read out, that you have had quite a bit of experience with learning and studying creative writing. You've done courses in it, but then you went on to do a whole lot of different things with your life, right? Not only did you live all over the world as a child of a diplomat, but you've also tried your hand at very many different careers. And so what was it that made you feel that you actually wanted to be a writer?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think first of all, thank you again for having me here, and it's my complete honor and privilege to be here, and to sort of be among the shortlisted authors, such a great list. I guess just to go straight into your question, writing has, I think, been something that maybe like many children or everyone probably here as well, who's a lover of literature and books and reading. I grew up with sort of telling stories. As a child, I used to draw my own comics even before I knew how to read and what the words would be. So I'd make up my own letters or languages in them and then narrate those stories to people. But also, I mean, for me, I grew up in a family which was very sort of delighted in reading, and that was sort of a topic of conversation, and everything. And it's in the dedication to the book is one of the dedications. There's two actually, but one of them is actually to my father, who passed away a couple during the pandemic actually. But in many ways, I think my love for literature and reading really stems from his love for literature and reading. And I remember when I'd finished, the book and it was coming out towards the end of his life, his memory was fading. So he wouldn't be able to retain very much. But I would tell him, oh, there's a book I've written, and it's going to be published, and there's these great reviews, and he would sort of smile every time and sort of be like, ah, that's something I always wanted to do, and it's I think maybe it is we sort of as a as a duty bound child, perhaps it is fulfilling the unfulfilled dreams of your parents. That is what one does. But I think really the love of literature and the love of books and reading really stems from my father. And so I was delighted that at the end I was actually sort of able to give him that. Although that wasn't necessarily the intention, it's just sort of carried through.
But you're happy with your decision to be a writer, not just because of your father, but also for your own satisfaction? Yeah, out of all the many things you're doing? Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, with all the other, I think you'd have to talk to my wife as well about whether it's a good decision as well. But I think there's always people, as with any, I think, South Asian family, there's always the expectation that this is some. Yes, this is great. It's good that you're doing this, but make sure that you're able to sort of manage the other aspects of your life, right? So it's always a balance, but definitely, I mean, I think it's been something that I've always loved, and I don't think I could stop it. Like, I think I have to sort of write stories. Sorry, I didn't catch that.
I don't think I can stop it in your new career.
Sorry, the sound cut out. Could you just
Yeah,
repeat it?
I'm certainly hearing myself louder than I should be. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Hear me now? No. Okay. Right, so we are here to discuss this book of yours, Blasphemy, which I notice has a different name in the Pakistan edition, but we know this as Blasphemy. This is a book for those who haven't had a chance to see it as yet. It's a novel. It's a page turner because this is about a young Christian child, boy, very poor, comes from a family that works essentially as domestic labor, domestic staff. And he one day is suddenly accused of blasphemy, which is a death sentence if he is committed. And he is completely helpless. He doesn't know where this has come out of. There is some indication that it may be a revenge, vengeance thing against him and his family. And a young lawyer steps in to take up his case and to fight it and to try and get justice for him. And that is the story of the book. So, Usman, what made you write this book as the first book you wanted to write?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I function as what they call a discovery writer. So I don't think I set out to write this particular book. I would sort of write and see. But there was a case many years ago where Asma Jahangir defended this Christian boy, Salamat Masih, along with a few other people. And the whole case, when I read about it, was the most Kafka-esque thing I'd ever read. I mean, he was convicted in the lower courts, and then eventually the higher courts overturned it. And Salamat Masih and his sort of one of his relatives fled to Germany. But the whole case was, there were things like there was no physical evidence, and because they couldn't leave it there because to leave it there would have been blasphemous. The judge never knew what was actually written on the side of the mosque wall because to say it would have been blasphemous. One of the witnesses was illiterate, so you couldn't have actually read what was written to begin with. So there was all these just a preponderance of different evidence and things that just made it the most ridiculous thing in the world. And yet this child was, his entire life was being threatened. There was, various people connected to that case were killed. And so I think as at the time I was also in the US and I was sort of away from Pakistan. There's this sort of rising or anti-Islamic sentiment as well, and I think just the sort of juxtaposition of those two sort of things, and the sense that there was this grave injustice, and I don't know what it was, but exactly, but I couldn't write about anything else but that in the end, because it just the characters and everything.
So what was the kind of research that you did that went into it? I mean, you started with the seed of a real story, which was the Salamat Masih case with Asma Jahangir. But after that, what kind of research did you put into it to create this novel?
No, absolutely. So I think every aspect of it, to some extent, has been, borrowed or like research on some level. So up until I went to the courthouses in Quetta. Again, I relocated it for the sake of the story, right? So it's not in the Punjab, but it's in Balochistan because I'm more familiar with that as well. But I went to the courthouses in Quetta. I sort of sat and watched sort of things, the proceedings take place. I remember sort of the sound of the fans, the sweat back. There were little things that I picked up from just walking around. And there's a scene where there's a group of people sort of gathered together who were waiting to be sort of who were trying to escape or run away or flee the country, and they're sort of brought back. And I sort of brought those little bits or hints in there. I remember being very concerned about court proceedings and the process when I started the novel. And I remember showing it to a human rights lawyer, a fairly prominent human rights lawyer in Pakistan at the time, sort of saying, "Is this right? Because I don't want this to be sort of wrong." And he turned to me and said, "I've seen everything imaginable happen in a Pakistani courtroom. Don't worry, this is not even going that far beyond the sort of realms of possibility or probability. This is very much in the scope of believability and sort of accuracy." So that gave me some reassurance. But it was but it was a lot of sort of researching and reading, direct sort of secondary sources or even listening to primary sources from people in different segments of society, people who are radicalized or people who have been radicalized. A lot of different aspects or for different characters, I would do sort of different kinds of research. And then the trick is, whittling down on it or incorporating it and removing the fluff so it serves the story rather than become sort of, look at all this research I've done. And the ultimate aim, of course, of all the research is to make the lies appear true, right? So once it's done, whether it sits in with people and feels, yes, that's real. That's the sort of aim.
Osman, your novel is also full of really sort of real feeling, three-dimensional characters. And in fact, I'm going to talk a little more about the characters later because I feel you do very interesting things with them. But one of the running themes of your book is also the love story between Sikandar Ghaznavi and his college sweetheart, who's his college sweetheart, Sana. And then he comes back home and finds that she's actually married to another man. And that is very much part of, the story of that relationship runs throughout the book because she also becomes a co-defendant along with Sikandar in the case for, defending Daniel Masih. Now, you mentioned to me that you wanted to read a passage which was from the book, but which was also about the two of them. Are you still game to do that? Because it would be great to hear you read something from the book.
Absolutely, I'd be delighted to. So this
Cafe is not in Lahore, not in Quetta. in Pakistan where the book is set, but it's in the US, isn't it?
That's right. This is sort of a flashback, I suppose, to early and when they're sort of just meeting up, and because it is such a um, central relationship in the story, and I wanted to read from it, but I wanted to read something very short that still sort of touch upon everything. I thought I'd read from here. Okay. So the newly opened cafe near the School of Architecture would become Sikandar's favorite coffee shop. During the balmy summer days in New Haven, Sikandar would soak up the vibrancy of the city in the outdoor seating area. He would sit and watch the daily motions of university life, graduate students from the Yale School of Drama talking about new forms of performance art, undergraduates moaning about an A minus to their unsympathetic teaching assistants, and daring students attempting to complete an assignment in a coffee shop instead of a library. His favorite aspect of the cafe would quickly become the used books for sale. The shelves bursting with novels and biographies made Sikandar nostalgic for the bookstores of Islamabad, where Sikandar and his father would hunt for hidden treasures. Unlike the stale books of modern chain stores, each of these books offer two stories, that of the author and that of the previous owner. And it was this double adventure that Sikandar loved, looking through the margins and reading the previous owner's comments and building up an image of him or her in his mind. What are you going to have? The Tale of Two Turkeys? Sana asked. Each of the dishes had been given a name with a literary reference. I usually go for a Jane Rare or Tempesto, but today I think I'll have some scones. That does sound good. I might get an espresso as well. You know, I love the idea of scones more than I actually like the reality of scones. Excuse me? Sana asked. I read about scones long before I actually saw them. They'd be in these young adult books that I used to read as a kid. The stories set in England focused on teenagers solving crimes. Brief interludes would involve all the main characters picnicking in the countryside. The picnics would be filled with the most mouth-watering descriptions of food, food I didn't even recognize. The words were completely foreign to me, but they're forever associated with the English countryside and far-off peaceful lands. Scones were amongst those mysterious savory delights. So these stories set in England with their vivid descriptions of food and scones transported you away from home. I suppose so. They provide an escape. That really raises a whole other issue. What were you trying to escape, Sikandar? She asked. He didn't answer. Over coffee, they discussed the usual set of topics, where they were from. Both were from Pakistan. Sana's father was in the military. Siblings. Sana had a sister. Sikandar was an only child. And what they wanted to accomplish in life. Human rights lawyer, Sana said without the slightest hesitation. She carefully sipped a cup of steaming espresso. You? Don't know. Really? Yes, is that such a surprise? Sikandar took a sip of water. Well, it is given that you're here. I feel like most people in the school know exactly what they want to do. Even those who don't know, well, they make something up. Everyone is so driven. True. Though I guess most of them aren't able to predict the future, Sana said. You owe me an explanation.
Okay. So that's when they're just beginning to get to know each other, right?
Yeah.
And then just on the, just at a sort of peak moment, she kind of vanishes from his life. And then he rediscovers her years later in a very different sort of setting. Tell me something. You have been, what kind of a response have you received from the book, for the book? I have, my gosh, every now and then I start blaring forth. It's very unnerving. I have seen some of the testimonials, and some of them are from Atish Tasir, for example, has written, in this novel of quiet, creeping horror, Haneef forces us to confront the supreme evil that lies at the heart of Pakistan's blasphemy law. And in fact, the murder of Atish Tasir's father is also mentioned in the book. You do make a reference to it. You've got Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy, the Oscar-winning filmmaker, who says you have to remind yourself that Usman's novel and the characters he conjures are fictional because they are convincingly real. So much so that their words stay with you long after you have put down the book. And similarly, there's quite a collection of positive things about the book. And yet, I'm not so sure, because it's a very, very difficult subject, as taking up this whole issue. And what kind of responses have you had to it?
So the response generally, I mean, from the critical reception has been incredibly sort of encouraging, and I've been so delighted with it. I think what's been interesting for me has been in the promotion and the discussion of the novel. As you mentioned, alluded to earlier, it's we retitled it for Pakistan. We also removed many of the some of the scenes that I think were even the scene you referenced where we talk about the murder of Salman Taseer and sort of bring it into the present day. And there were some other sort of adjustments or edits that had to be made. And so it's been interesting to go on panels or go on talks about a book that's titled Blasphemy and be told that, can you not mention blasphemy when you promote the book? Because, and I understand where everyone's coming from. And my intention is, to respect the platform or the space that's being given to me. But to me, it's also incredibly important to try and elevate or raise this issue, to bring it sort of to the fore and to have a sort of discussion about it, because it seems sort of we talk about unjust laws. I mean, the prime example of an unjust law is the blasphemy law, because its use is nothing more than a use of oppression and a use of sort of settling vendettas and targeting minorities wherever and in this particular case it's sort of minorities in Pakistan, but we see these sorts of laws across the world. And it's I think it's important to try and elevate that discussion. So it's been very heartening. It's been very touching, the response, especially not just from sort of reviewers and critics, but also from students or aspiring authors who sort of say, well, now we feel like we can talk about this topic, or I'm researching this topic now and I want to discuss it. And that's been, I think, the most heartening thing. I don't know, I'm not saying it's going to sort of transform everything, but at least it's a one swing at that wall.
It's been opened up as something to discuss and talk about and grapple with, right? Is the law still very much in place?
Yes, very much in place. There's still cases that are going on. There's a prominent case for Junaid Hafiz, a lecturer who was accused of putting something blasphemous on sort of online. I mean, they're just cases upon cases when it comes to the blasphemy law, and it's not. It doesn't seem to be sort of abating or going away anytime soon. So it's, I think, critical that really we address it or stem it, or in some sort of way, some of the issues that are coming from it.
Usman, one of the things I found very interesting about this book is the fact that you have these very, very vivid, strong characters. I mean, you have, of course, the central central two, in a sense, the hero and the heroine, which is Sikandar, the young lawyer, and Sana, his ex-girlfriend, and still his romantic love throughout the book. And both of them are sort of very sort of strong people, very well etched in their own right. But apart from that, you also have a whole host of other characters. There's the little boy, of course, with his vivid green eyes and his ability to see things in his dreams, as he keeps thinking and saying that he can see things in his dreams. And then you have Peer Pia, who is this sort of very, very magnetic kind of character who is actually at the center of the vengeance-driven action against the boy. And you have the family of Abe, right? Is that how you pronounce it? Abe was
Yeah.
the what who we would probably call an ayah, somebody who brought up Sikandar as a small boy and was very much part of the family, and her family and their family members. So you have a host of characters, and these characters are all given space. They're all given words. They speak. They have sort of a living presence on the page. So I wanted to ask you if you would like to read something about any of them, because one of the things that I wanted you to respond to is that I felt that all the characters you build through the book are very complicated, layered. There's very little that's black and white about them. There's nobody who's even the most villainous character, if you think of Pirpia. Even there you find areas of vulnerability, or you find some kind of twisted explanation for the way he is. And towards the end of the book, there's even an encounter with Sikandar where he almost becomes a figure of pity, you know. So I mean, going from that to the father who was losing his memory and who'd gone from being this glowing, shining hero to somebody who was actually almost like a pain for his family, because he had become violent, he'd become unreasonable because of the memory loss. So there's always these shades of of the good and the bad, and these different ways in which people are. And I was wondering if you would like to read something, or if you like, I can read something, because I picked out a few passages as well. Have you got anything else in mind that you'd like to read?
I think, yeah, I can read out. I think you did sort of share some of the passages, and I'd be happy to read that out. Talking about when they're in the car together, just about to, yes, I can read
This
that.
was a passage which I had picked out, and I asked Osman if he would read it, or I would. Basically, one of the sort of the central pivots of the book, in a sense, because this is the personality that draws guilt over home, draws Sikandar back to Quetta, to his home. And this is the woman who brought him up, Abe as he calls her. And he always, thought of her in his mind as a family member, as somebody he loved dearly, was part of the family. But that wasn't quite the way it was, because she came from a very poor family, and she had her own family who she would go back to. And at one point in the book, and Abe has died in the time that Sikandar has been away. And he's deeply guilty, because he feels he did not give her the kind of attention. She had once called him for help, and he was busy with a lot of things. He didn't call back, and by the time he thought of it, she had already passed away. And this guilt is burning him up inside. So this is an encounter between Zishan, who's Abe's grandson, and Sikandar, who is roughly Zishan's age, but is the child that she spent her life bringing up. And the two of them are sort of for the first time having a serious conversation. So Osman, Osman, would you like to read, please?
Of course, right. Just, yeah. Of course, you would take the side of the Americans, Zishan said. Bin Laden is hardly a champion of Islam. A man who orchestrates a plan to slaughter innocents is not a hero, Sikandar said. They're not innocent. We're more responsible for the problems that plague Pakistan than they are. So you think bombing innocent families in Afghanistan, wedding parties with women and children is fine as long as you say you're fighting terrorists? Is that right? Do you really think that's fair? I'm not talking about drone strikes. Of course you would defend them. What do you have against me? Sikandar asked. Excuse me? This isn't about American foreign policy or drone strikes. You've been bizarrely hostile towards me. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but I'm not, am I? I don't know what you're talking about. Since we've met, you've been using all sorts of innuendo and passing snide remarks. You seem to hate me. Why? What have I ever done to you? Zishan laughed a nervous laugh. uncomfortable and uneasy. You don't see it. See what? We've only just met. What have I done? Sikandar asked. Are you really so self absorbed? Zishan raised his voice. The nervous laughter was gone. He gritted his teeth and his fists tightened around the steering wheel. We may have just met, but I've known about you for almost my entire life. What are you talking about? You're the boy who took away my grandmother and the only mother I'd ever have. You took Abhay away when I needed her. You took her away from my entire childhood. What's worse is, you didn't even appreciate her. When you were done, you sent her back. You threw her away like a piece of rubbish, he said, his voice shrill and wheezing magnified. She wanted to be with you, Sikandar said, only because you didn't want her anymore. When she was here, all she would talk about was you. All the time, she never shut up about you. My Sikandar is so handsome, so clever. He used to do this magic trick and that magic trick. Everything that I did was wrong. You would never do wrong. I told her to forget about you because you had forgotten about her. I was here. Where were you? You had left her. You didn't care, but I was here. That's not fair. I loved her. Really, Sikandar? How often did you write to her? How often did you call her? Did you know about her problems? About the abuse she suffered? About how she couldn't sleep towards the end of her life? Did you know that no Hakim could help her rest? In the end, only death gave her peace. Sikandar did not answer. You rich people think you own us. Send her away, give her a bit of money so her family looks after her. Even whores are treated better. At least no one pretends to love them.
Yeah, very
That's
powerful
enough.
because, you know, it through that dialogue between these two people, a lot of issues are sort of thrown up. And this, we all know about this sort of easy saying, oh, hum log ke family hain, you know, people who work with us. And it's not, it's very easy to say that at one level, but it's not entirely the reality. And what it feels like to be on the other side of that picture is, so these issues of class, of the friction between different segments of society. These are some of the things that come up between the really poor, the Christian family who have been sort of taken advantage of in different ways, who have no other recourse except to work in people's homes. These are the kind of issues that are coming up throughout the book. I mean, the main structure is that of the trial, but in the process of the trial, these other major issues of society are explored. I think that's something you should really need to be congratulated on, Usman. And there is another passage also which I particularly sort of liked, and with your permission, I would also like to read it a little later, Usman, which is the one where he's in the courtroom when he finally bursts out in anger against the judge, and he's accused of, he's told that you'd better keep quiet, otherwise I'm going to put you in contempt. That is another place where the author of the book takes up an issue, you know, an important issue to his mind. So if I'll just read this through. This is when the trial has dragged on and on and on, and Sikandar has finally managed to somehow prove that the boy could not have done it. Sikandar paused and pinched his forehead. His body ached and he felt tired. He took a deep breath and began. This whole trial has gone on too long, Sikandar said. The boy is illiterate. Everyone in this courtroom knows it. The police officers who arrested Danesh certainly knew it, and yet they did so anyway. Danesh is on trial for a crime he did not commit. Before you accuse me of being a foreign agent, of having forgotten the roots of who I am, of having abandoned Islam, and of being too Western, I ask you this. What is so Western about tolerance and human rights? Muslims, and by extension Pakistanis, are constantly painted as barbaric by countless media outlets around the world. The words religious extremism and terrorism have become synonymous with Islam. Yet it was this religion of Muhammad that preached tolerance during Europe's darkest ages. Ibn Sina and other Islamic scholars saved the works of Aristotle and other Greek philosophers during the golden age of Islam. We advanced chemistry, mathematics, astronomy, and other sciences. Jewish and Christian ghettos thrived in Istanbul at the height of the Ottoman Empire. Islam used to be the most tolerant religion in the world. What happened? Now an innocent boy suffers for a crime that he did not commit, that he could not commit because he is illiterate. What do we do in response to this? Nothing. We sit idly by and do nothing. We take to the streets to protest the perceived injustices against us by foreigners. Yet what about the injustice we inflict upon ourselves, against minorities, the poor, against women, and against so many others in the name of honor? It's time we stopped reacting to what the world says about us and feeling the need to defend ourselves against foreigners. We need to focus on ourselves. We need to end the injustice that we impose on our own people. Sikandar stopped. The crowd watched, unmoved. That's a lovely speech, Sikandar Sahib. Are you quite done? Because I'm very close to holding you in contempt of court, the judge said, deflating Sikandar. Right? So this was a point in the novel where a lot of the underlying issues sort of burst out of the protagonist, so to speak. Can you tell us about when you were writing this? What were you thinking, or was it something you were wanting to give as a message, or did it just happen?
Yeah, well, first of all, I must say that was a brilliant reading of the book. And if I could take you to every book reading I have, I think I could just have you as a stand-in for me. So thank you so much for that. I just want to acknowledge that first of all. I wish you'd done the other passages as well. But just about that in particular, yeah, so it was interesting. There's a lot of things going on. There was obviously a feeling of, in any sort of courtroom or trial drama, there is that that end message. Usually in an American courtroom, obviously there's a jury, and so they are able to do their closing arguments. But that's not the way it happens in Pakistan. And what is likely to happen is the case like to go on and on and on. And I remember looking at this and thinking, well, someone said, well, maybe they could give a speech to journalists afterwards or something else. And I remember feeling, no, like this has to happen at this point when the frustration, when the breaking point comes, because there's nothing left to lose. Like all the evidence has been presented. Clearly this case is a farce. And I think it is a bit of a release for the reader as well, like a sense of, yes, this is the point we're all boiling to. But I also wanted to do this thing where I played with the convention, because at the end of a speech like this, usually in almost every courtroom drama, there is the thunderous applause from the audience, or the person is acquitted for the crime and like everything. And I wanted to capture the absolute frustration that Sikandar is going through, and the frustration the reader is probably feeling as well in the connection, and to give voice to it, or to give a voice to it, but also to contrast that with or to play with the reader's expectations as well to some extent, and to sort of show the reality of the system and how it isn't, you're not going to have a white knight or a savior come in and fix everything. And maybe it is, in many ways, it is also a call to the reader, right? It is also a discussion that we need to stop, looking at external excuses. We need to stop looking for saviors and white knights, and we need to look sort of inwards, and we need to make sort of that change. So yes, in that sense, although I'm always, those are all things at play. But I'm also careful, because I hate the idea of preaching to anyone. And I think it's important that it's not just the reason why the characters are sort of, as you mentioned, alluded to earlier, gray, with good and bad dimensions. The point is not to sort of say this is necessarily the way, or this is a stand-in for the author, because I think it's important to separate the work from the author. But it is definitely for the character of Sikandar, and I think also perhaps for many readers, giving voice to uh, a view that I think is an important perspective, I suppose.
Um, we can start taking questions from the audience. If anybody would like to ask Usman anything. Is there anybody has a question or even a comment, something you want to know about? While you're thinking, while you're thinking of your questions, I'll carry on with the conversation, but remember you're welcome to interrupt anytime. Was there somebody who wanted to ask something? I see a hand up at the back there. Right. Atri, is that you asking a question?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was right at the back.
Yeah.
Firstly, thank you for this amazing conversation. I think me and my friend are already buying the book, just hearing about it. I just wanted to know, at any point while you were talking to your publisher and everything, did the question of this might get banned come in? And what did you think? Like, did you think that this is a good thing to go ahead with, or were there flutters when it came out? And I see that you have also changed the name and it's releasing in Pakistan. So yeah, would love to know about that. Thank you.
Yeah, anybody who says that if they're writing a book about blasphemy, they weren't worried about any kind of ban or anything else would be lying, I think. And thank you so much for the question. It's the whole journey actually has been a very sort of tumultuous and difficult journey. There were many times where I thought the project wouldn't come through. I remember in the early days when I was shopping around for literary agents. One literary agent told me, sort of a very prominent one in the UK, told me, look, no one is going to say this because no one wants to admit it sort of publicly. But after Salman Rushdie and Satanic Verses, no one is going to touch a book about blasphemy. And I was like, well, look, the book itself doesn't commit the act of blasphemy, but it talks about these laws, these injustices that are, I mean, we have to sort of address this. He's like, look, I'm just telling you the reality of the situation. If you can just change the topic, make it about some other, make it about some other sort of crime or something else, it's fine. Just just don't mention last year. And I just couldn't do that really. I found that at that stage it had sort of become so integral to the book that it was that was impossible. But there was definitely moments like that. Various, I think, people along the way who were sort of saying, well, yes, but maybe we could just change this entire issue, remove the central issue at the heart of the book. And that's what I struggled with. And even in Pakistan, I think there was a question about how much to remove or willing to remove. But again, I think recognizing the sensitivity of this topic, my point was to get the conversation going and give people sort of visibility, like you can talk about these subjects and you can sort of address them, and we should try to address them if we're going to move forward. Otherwise, if we can't talk about it, we can't do anything about them. So in that sense, it was an interesting tightrope to walk. But I appreciate my agent in India, Shana Kambata, and also Readermania publishers for taking it on, because I think it was a bold step by them. And I think even in all our promotions, we still deal with the question of, well, maybe don't use the title of the book, or can you not do this or that? So it is a very a difficult line to walk or sort of manage, but I think we've been doing okay so far. But thank you for the question.
Any more questions? So I wanted to ask you, Osman, that one thing that comes through very clearly in the book is a sense of the importance of paying back to society. sort of social responsibility of actually, I mean, whether it's Sana who insists that she wants to be a human rights lawyer and go back from the States to Pakistan, she's always wanted that. Whether it's Sikandar's father who's himself fought for, for justice for his whole life, or the mother, Sikandar's mother, who's perhaps the one person in the book who's all good and doesn't have something in her that is slightly dark or negative. There is this running idea of which seems to come through. Is that something that you as a younger generation Pakistani, who's grown up with a lot of privileges in your society, maybe living abroad most of your life, is this a message that you feel is important for people like you in Pakistan? Those option maybe of not engaging with their social society.
I think it's not just sort of, I think, for people in Pakistan, or but I think given the state of the world we're in, I think everyone with privilege and resources has a responsibility to sort of give back, and it doesn't have to be sort of a grand, sweeping sort of return, but I think the feeling of like social responsibility, the feeling of responsibility to others, I think is the like foundation of any sort of successful society, right? And I think the idea of sort of tolerance and community and sort of building that sort of cohesion is essential, I think, for us to flourish and us to actually, I mean, COP is taking place right now and around the world, and so we are facing an existential threat as a species, and maybe in the it's essential for us to work together and work for each other in order to survive as a species. And we haven't done a very good job of it so far. If the pandemic has shown us anything, it's just shown us the sort of great inequity that exists globally, especially when you look at sort of access to vaccines and everything else. But I think these challenges constantly highlight the need for us as individuals to sort of support each other and to come together as a community or society. So yeah, I do feel strongly about it. I don't think it's necessarily so limited in terms of the context to just say, one country or one group of people.
It pertains to many, many of us who live all over the world, I would say, yeah. I think, unless there are any further questions, would anybody like to ask anything? No? Okay. There you go. Why don't you do that? Take a mic and do it. That'll be lovely.
Osman, let me congratulate you. You've written a wonderful book. It's something which we, I'm from Punjab, and, we on this side of Punjab are always interested in what's happening on the other side. And I think it's a very powerful tale. It's a very gripping tale. And I'd just like to congratulate you on behalf of the Value Words team that it's a very powerful tale. And I hope that it does very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jean. Thank you for, being part of this sort of, and bringing sort of giving me this platform really, and sort of all the authors here at the Value the Words Festival, this opportunity to sort of share our book with readers. I mean, especially, during the pandemic and everything else and the difficulties that are taking place, it's been very hard for us to reach readers. So this is actually a delight and a true privilege. Thank you so much.
Well, I think we will bring this session to a close, reluctantly. It would be lovely to carry on chatting. But thank you very much for joining us, Osman, and all the best with the book. I hope it continues to perhaps find many more avatars and many more incarnations through translations into different languages. And and see you soon again. I hope.
Thank you so much. And I must say, especially thank you for that those readings as well. Beyond anything else, if if you ever, if I do go on any more book tours, I will definitely sort of reach out to you for some tips. But thank you for these engaging questions and really for hosting me here. It's been, as I said earlier, a real privilege. So thank you so much for this really engaging conversation.